thanks again for everyone for joining us at this event. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's an honor for me to speak today at this event organized by the Adaptation Fund as part of the second session of the Gobeshona Global Conference. I would like to thank the International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICAD, for inviting us to present on the theme of locally led adaptation actions, and would like to extend my congratulations for this second session of the Gobeshona Conference. It's my pleasure to welcome you all at this Adaptation Fund session on the theme of locally led adaptation actions, experience, and perspective from the Adaptation Fund. The Adaptation Fund is a nimble, accessible, and effective vehicle for supporting countries and communities to build long-term resilience to climate change. With its focus on concrete adaptation action, the fund has been delivering effective programs to most vulnerable communities for over more than 15 years now. As of now, we have about $1 billion of portfolio covering about 100 countries, including 33 less developing countries and 19 small island development states. Since the inception of the fund, the Adaptation Fund has pioneered the direct access modality, in which developing countries can access climate finance directly through their own country institutions and systems. The Adaptation Fund also pioneered the enhanced direct access modality, which is a flexible approach to grant funding delivery, and which could better match needs and capacity at the local level, empowering national implementing entities. The event today will discuss Adaptation Fund experiences on implementing locally led actions on the ground, and the role of local leadership and pursuing effective actions on climate adaptations. We will have the opportunity to present the findings from a study produced by the Adaptation Fund titled Local Leadership in Adaptation Finance, followed by a discussion on common challenges that local actors have faced in converting the promise of local empowerment into effective actions in practice. We'll also have the opportunity to hear from our partners on the ground, who will present some concrete actions, examples of locally led actions, and how resilience is being addressed at local level with strong community engagement. While transition to our new medium-term strategy covering the period 2023-2027, we recognize the importance of locally led actions on the ground. And we believe that locally led action is key to building long-term resilience, and we remain committed to advance this work in empowering local actors to drive the climate actions. Let me end by thanking again the Gobeshona Global Conference and all partners involved in this work on locally led actions. And we remain committed to work with all partners in empowering in improving climate finance access and empowering local actors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I will follow up with the presentation on behalf of the Adaptation Fund. Let me put it up on the screen really quick. Let me know if you can see it. And
yes, we can see it, but maybe you can put in the, yeah, now you're good to go. Yeah.
Okay, and you can hear me well. Okay, so this presentation will give you, I'm going to give you first a very brief overview, and really very brief because Mohammed already went over some of the features, brief overview of the fund and its achievements to date. I will follow this with an overview of the main policies and procedures that were put in place over the years to ensure involvement of local actors in the design and decision-making of adaptation interventions. And finally, I will present some findings and lessons learned of the study that Mohammed mentioned on locally led adaptation finance, which was produced by the fund more than a year ago. So the Adaptation Fund is one of several funds in the multilateral finance landscape. And since its inception 13 years ago, the fund has pioneered a direct access modality, which was the first of its kind to be fully operational among climate funds, with a mandate to finance concrete adaptation projects and programs that benefit the most vulnerable to climate change. Through the direct access modality, accredited national implementing entities are able to direct access financing and manage all aspects of climate adaptation and resilience projects, from design to implementation and through monitoring. On the screen here, you will have the total of 56 accredited implementing entities that we have to date, of which 34 are national institutions, 14 are multilateral implementing entities, and 8 are regional ones. And the fund was also set up under the Kyoto Protocol and served the Paris Agreement since January of 2019. Up to date, the AF board, the Adaptation Fund board, approved around 123 projects for a total funding amount of almost $1 billion US. And this infographic really offers you an overview of how we're spread out around the globe, with the highest investments in Africa, in the Africa region, which is around 40% of the total portfolio, followed by Latin America and the Caribbean with around 29% of the portfolio, and Asia Pacific with 26% of the portfolio. And then finally, this fiscal year, we also had 2 projects approved under the innovation aggregator that I will detail more later in the presentation. And this is implemented by our colleagues from UNEP and UNDP. In terms of a spread out of sectors of our portfolio, we'll see that we have around 19% in disaster risk reduction, followed by food security, agriculture, and so on. And we also have some projects in urban development and forest. In terms of some concrete results that we have achieved to date, we have managed to reach around 33 million direct and indirect beneficiaries, to restore over 380,000 hectares of natural habitats, to protect 162,275 meters of coastline. We've also trained 115,000 beneficiaries in climate change resilience, and we have managed to put in place 412 early warning systems. Now, in terms of further policies and procedures that we have put in place to aid this locally led action, are a few. First is the streamlined accreditation process. So essentially in 2015, in response to interest from smaller entities and countries, the board approved a streamlined accreditation process that allows national entities to demonstrate their capacities to manage smaller amounts of climate finance. Then on the environmental and social policies, the AF approved its first ESP in 2013 and subsequently revised it in 2016. It also approved the gender policy in 2016. The ESP1 aims to ensure that projects and programs supported by the fund do not result in unnecessary environmental and social harms, and all funding proposals essentially are screened for compliance with the AF, ESP, and the gender policies against 15 principles. The policy requires that implementing entities identify all stakeholders from the very beginning, all of them that are involved in the intervention area, involve them as early as possible in planning and of any project or programs supported by the fund. And all beneficiaries in the target areas are required to be included in a robust and meaningful consultative process. Then a further, somehow it doesn't show on the screen, perhaps it was in the presentation that I shared earlier, but a further one is the enhanced direct access window, which is up to 5 million per country, and which essentially offers an opportunity that helps build the capacity of local organizations to program adaptation finance and design and implement their own projects through locally led action at the subnational level. We already have a few of these projects in place that were even approved before the window was approved. And one thing to mention, that this stands outside the country cap that is currently established at 20 million per project. The other funding window is the AFSIA, which is Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, which was approved as part of the medium-term strategy for 2018 and 2023. And the interesting feature about the AFSIA is that the entities eligible to apply for these small grants do not need to be accredited with the fund. So they don't need to go through the rigorous accreditation process. They can be community-based organizations, women's organizations, NGOs, even small private sector, and they're aimed to encourage and accelerate innovation and generate evidence base. And this again stands outside of the country cap established by the board. This AFSIA, just to mention, is administered by the UNDP and UNEP CTCN, and we will hear from some of the grantee recipients later in the session. Then finally, just to mention the study that the Adaptation Fund commissioned over a year ago, titled Locally Led Action in Adaptation Fund Projects and Programs. This was aligned with the learning and sharing pillar of the fund's 5-year medium-term strategy, and it examined locally led actions of 6 funded projects in Cambodia, Costa Rica, the Federated States of Micronesia, South Africa, Uganda, and a regional one in Colombia and Ecuador. And it examined really the common challenges and gathered lessons on what works in practice to best promote locally led action in the face of the existing barriers. A few, let me just move this, somehow the findings, oh, here we go. A few findings were identified. First of all, it's important to make the most of opportunities for locally led leadership. So on capacities assessment is key to establishing strong partnerships. So essentially assessing the local level capacity at the outset has several benefits, and it includes generating mutual trust in each organization's capabilities. It sets clear expectations about what capacity support is needed for successful project execution, and it targets resources effectively towards filling capacity gaps. Then involving local government has the potential to empower local leaders to play an important long-term role in adaptation action, essentially ensuring sustainability over the long term. Then it's important to have sensitive and respectful working methods which can help build trust with the local communities. So methods with the implementing entities can improve prospects for successful working with local actors by understanding a region's history and consulting closely with local leaders and adopting locally appropriate working methods. Then on actually delivering locally led action in practice, it is important to institute simple and flexible procedures, which is really key to effective project management. It has been found that when implementing entities are creative and really flexible, they can adapt project management processes to insulate local actors from administrative burdens. As local leaders are really well placed to determine appropriate and effective methods for communication and decision-making on the ground, and sensitization on locally led approaches may increase local ownership and the likelihood of sustaining project outcomes. So as key actors really may be accustomed to undertake national institutions take on key roles in project execution. They can be well placed to take on leadership roles in the future, adaptation initiatives on a larger scale, and where the national implementing entities demonstrate their capacities in managing climate finance, they can grow into higher level strategic roles in the future. And some of the lessons learned, a part of the ones that I've already mentioned on capacity gaps and using innovation and being flexible, as well as putting in place institutional or even government-related differences across the national territory. This may contribute to leveling the playing field across economic and cultural differences within countries. And we will hear of some of these examples later in the presentation. Then also one last one that that came across is where adaptation can be a challenging concept for local actors. A focus on cross-cutting issues can increase local buy-in. And in one of the projects that was examined, we noticed that water really was a main part of all the climate vulnerability elements of the components. So then using water in the discussion was an easier way to communicate with the local communities for those who couldn't really understand the concept of climate adaptation. And finally, working with local actors can require additional logistics efforts to overcome challenges due to language, different native languages and on the ground, and also remoteness of some of the intervention areas. And then non-traditional planning and execution require investments in awareness raising across the levels. And this concludes the findings, the presentation and the findings and the lessons from the study. I welcome any questions in the chat box. You have my credentials here. I understand that the Q&A is at the end of the session, but you're welcome to type in any questions as you wish. Thank you, Mohammed. Back to you.
Thank you, Christine. I will take over from here. So I see that there are some questions that have been asked in the Q&A. So perhaps, Christina, you can try to respond to those. As Christina has indicated, this study is available in our website. So in case you need more detail, you can download it in our website. As we have announced at the beginning, this session is really to hear from our implementing entities and our beneficiaries on the ground. So they are the best one to tell you how the local aid actions funded by the Adaptation Fund works and how we believe that this is one of the better way to deliver adaptation benefits on the ground. One of the approach that we have been implementing over the past years is the enhanced direct access, and this modality is really supporting the local led actions by devolving the decision making in the programming to the sub-national level or local levels. That means that screening, review, and selection of projects are being done at the local level. And we have with us one of our implementing entity which has implemented successfully an enhanced direct access project. So this is South African National Biodiversity Institute, SAMBI. And we have with us Mr. Mumfunzeni Shindan, sorry for spelling your name wrongly, hopefully not, who is the project coordinator at SAMBI. So Mfunzeni, we'll be happy to hear from you about the key lesson learned that you have gotten from this project, taking adaptation to the ground, small ground facility for enabling local level response to climate change. And again, since this is the first EDA project that the Adaptation Fund has funded, we want to hear from you your reflection on this approach and how you believe that this is an efficient way to deliver adaptation projects on the ground compared to the normal project that we do usually with our implementing entities. So Mfunzeni, the floor is yours, and if you can take 10 to 12 minutes to deliver your presentation, thanks.
Thank you, Mohammed. I've sent some slides. Do you want me to project from my end?
Yes, that will be helpful if you can do so.
Okay, I'll try doing that.
Mfunzeni, this is Alyssa. I have your slides open as well. So in case you have trouble, just let me know and I'll be able to display your slides.
I'd prefer that you present, Alicia, and then I'll tell you when to move on.
Okay, if I can request the host to allow me to share screen, please.
Okay. And maybe when Alicia is doing that in the background, I'll introduce myself and then I'll turn off my video camera. My signal is not the best here. So I'm Mfunzeni Chindane. I'm with the South African National Biodiversity Institute. SANBI is an accredited entity of the fund. And we have been implementing two projects, one of which I'll be talking to you today, which is the Community Adaptation Small Grants Facility Project. This is, this was a pilot project which we started implementing from 2015. And just recently, the project came to an end, which was on the 31st of December 2021. So currently, we are putting together some close-out reports and our final PPR. It's been really a pleasure to be part of the first enhanced direct access from the fund. So I take it Alicia is having some issues. Oh, I can't present as well on my end. Host disabled participation. Can we get some assistance on that? Alicia?
So it says the host has disabled my share screen. So if I can request someone to please allow me to share my screen.
Yes, sir, you can access.
All right, great. You can just put that on slide mode. And oh yeah, great. So that was just me introducing myself, and you can move on to the second slide. Well, yeah, I just wanted to also give a brief background of the project before I delve into some of the key learnings and the key outputs of the project. So as I mentioned, this was a pilot project with a value of about $2.5 million US. And it started implementation in 2015. and it came to an end late last year. So the overall aim or the goal of the project was to award about 12 small grants projects in the tune of about $100,000 US to build their resilience to climate change impacts. So what this means, and I think the introductory speakers talked to this a little bit, is that when the Adaptation Fund approved the project, the actual on-the-ground interventions were not known. So the fund was, so the fund approved what were procedures of how to find these projects on the ground and implementing them with close monitoring from SANBI, which is what's called enhanced direct access. So this already drives home the message that the projects themselves were locally designed by the community-based organizations. And I mean, with fear of running out of time, I won't really dwell much on the overall structure and the governance of that. But what this entailed was that within the two districts, we had facilitating agencies which were working very closely with the community-based organizations to build, implement, and report on their projects. So you can move on to the next slide, which kind of gives us a landscape overview of the areas where we're working. So the picture at the top is a picture of the, one of our sites in the Mopani district. That's on the northern part of South Africa. And the picture at the bottom is a picture showing the Namakwa district, which is on the western side of South Africa, southern western side of South Africa. So as you can see, some of these areas are very arid, and with localized climate data, it's really projecting that more erratic rainfalls will be coming and temperature will be getting much hotter within these areas. This helped us to also identify some of the investment windows which we used to call for projects when we went into identifying what could be implemented. And the investment windows were around climate smart agriculture, climate proofing settlements, and climate resilient livelihoods. So you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, and just because of the pressure of time, I just felt I should summarize kind of the high level outcomes from these community-based organizations projects. So in all, we did reach our target of 7 projects. And I mean, as I've mentioned, they were responding to one or at least 2 of these investment windows. And as you can see there, just as an example, under the climate smart agricultural window, mostly Mopani, we had projects in establishing communal gardens and other assets, tangible assets, which were associated to that, like reservoirs and climate smart irrigation. And in the livelihoods, we had like the establishment of savings groups, and also in the settlement side, we had the insulation of houses, which were becoming inhabitable when it's in hotter conditions. And just maybe as a closing point on this slide was that the overall project was targeting about 600 beneficiaries. And I'm happy to say that through this pilot project, we ended up doubling the direct beneficiaries to just over, to about 1,921, and just under 10,000 indirect beneficiaries benefited from this project, which was a huge outcome. And like on the frame of this slide, I've got kind of like the different interventions captured in this slide, and I can come into this maybe during the question and answer session. So you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, back to the project as a whole, which was approved by the Adaptation Fund. We also had a component 3, where we had some sets of knowledge and communication products, which help us kind of capture some of the learnings and best practice methods, so that if we were to do this again and just to share with other partners and organizations out there who would want to be involved in this. And in doing that, we have a project summary, which kind of summarizes all of the community-based organizations and what they implemented within their communities. And we also developed a series of case studies, really informed by the challenges and best practice mechanisms. I mean, it could be around project management and governance. It could be about reporting and compliance. There was also one about capacity building and project development across the board. So those were kind of like the case studies which were developed, and a policy brief, which I'll kind of give you a highlight in my next slides. But I mean, the apex indicator was the development of a blueprint for enhanced direct access in South Africa. I'm really happy to say that all of these learning products really pour into this document so that it really informs us how to scale this up and do this again. I mean, given the opportunity in it, there are different modalities which could be unlocked from the various lessons which were found during our implementation stage. And if you want to read more about this, you can just Google SENVI SGF. It will take you to the landing page where you can read and download these products. Next slide. Yeah, excuse me for the detail in this. I don't expect you to read it. I'll just take you through some of the highlights here. Is that in the blueprint document are a set of principles which are informed by the learnings and experiences. And these cut across, I would say, 4 different points. One around project management, and then the other around the community organizations, project development and implementation processes. There was also principles in reporting and compliance, capacity building, and project learnings. So also what was very useful was that, or rather key, is that we also ensured that these principles align with the RRI principles, which were also developed sometime before we started. And maybe just to give you an example across all of these, the 4 pockets is around project management. We really felt that it's necessary to ensure that necessary capacity for supporting grant recipients during implementation is in place, including capacitated organizations with an understanding of and experience in the complexity of local grant making. And then for the grant recipients themselves, we found that it's really important to protect them from themselves. I mean, and in doing that, we found that we should have varying grant sizes. So when we did this, we just had a blanket amount of of R1 million in South Africa. And all of the grant recipients went for the blanket amount, and some of them had difficulties in reporting and implementing projects of that size. So really cutting it down to tailor-make grants for the capacities on the ground is something which we really want to encourage going forward. And in the reporting and compliance, we felt that, just as an example, there should be support for small grants recipients to understand compliance conditions and reporting processes requirements. And a key one which comes from that is what Christina also mentioned about the ESP reporting and compliance. Maybe just one last one under capacity building and project learnings. So just the previous slide is that we should invest in strengthening existing networks within and beyond direct grant recipients. And this has been a very key success factor in these districts where we find that even after project closure, you find these projects ongoing because of the networks and capacity which has been built just outside of the grant recipients themselves. So you can find these information and on our blueprint document. And then just second last, my slide is, so all of these principles really emanated into our policy brief recommendations, which you can see some of the buzzwords, which are what I've just mentioned on my slide before on the principles. So we developed a policy brief, which has been shared with our project partners and stakeholders, most importantly at local government, which really at times have been looking into developing plans to take these forward and support on the ground local adaptation. So I'll just leave those on the screen just for you to reflect. But yeah, they are really building on the principles I just talked in the previous slide. Next slide. Thank you. So maybe just as a closing point is that, and these are some of the success factors, is really having a bottom-up approach in putting together these proposals and working very closely and being patient with community-based organizations that have been very key in terms of building ownership even before financing is stopped. And also building capacity and having a standalone budget item on capacity building for these organizations, because we found that climate change is fairly new in these communities, and we really had to invest in that, which really informed the success of this project. Maybe just one last point is in South Africa, we were very fortunate to have downscaled climate science, which really informed us to really respond to the impacts on the ground. Yes, talking to the organizations, but also from a scientific angle, being informed by what's coming in the future. So I will leave it at that and happy to answer questions and also on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mfunzeni. And this is really nice to see concrete results from this first ever EDA project in South Africa funded by the Adaptation Fund. I know that people might have questions, but since we're running a bit short of time, maybe we can take questions at the very end. Without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Romario Michael, who is supervisor for loan program at the Department of Environment in Antigua and Barbuda. DOE is one of our national implementing entities, and they have been implementing a project called an integrated approach to physical adaptation and community resilience in Antigua and Barbuda, Northwest McKinnon watershed. This project has an innovative approach of delivering funds to concessional loan to local actors, and this has been delivering concrete results on the ground. And it's quite innovative because usually the Adaptation Fund works mainly with grant, but this has been an approach that we have been extremely proud of. So, Mr. Romario, I will let you maybe introduce, but maybe if you can focus your presentation on how this revolving approach of concessional funding has worked and how communities on the ground have achieve adaptation benefits. If you can do that maybe in 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can hear from one of your grantee on the ground, Ms. Cheryl Gordon as well. Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Kumar.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. The mic was muted. I began speaking. My name is Umar Michael from Antigua and Barbuda Department of Environment, SURF Fund. I'm currently in the capacity of the SURF Fund supervisor. I'm just here to just give you a brief synopsis or brief analysis of how the Adaptation Fund Component 2 aspect of the project is doing in Antigua and Barbuda. So here in this dashboard, we have in front of us the dashboard of what's currently going on in Antigua and Barbuda. The figures are quoted in Eastern Caribbean dollars, but we were given a portfolio of $3 million to program with in terms of component 2 of the Adaptation Fund program. When converted, we get $8 million. However, there's an administrative charge that we incur. So that's why it went down to $7.9 million. So far we see here that applicants have come out and gained access to this loan, where we see here that $4.7 million have been approved and $3 million has been approved. So that shows that applicants are willing to come forward and to create their homes or to make their homes more climate resilient against the change in the environment. And so far, remaining on the portfolio, we only have $124,000 to be programmed. So I'm leaving the experience of the application and the process to Ms. Cheryl Gordon, who will basically explain her process of how she feels when she went through the process of applying for the revolving loan program. So we had in total 47 persons who would have been approved. 29 of these persons, 29 persons be pre-approved. To date, they would have received final approval. So that number would have increased to 86, but pending, we have 5 and 6 persons declined overall. For the overall portfolio, we had 75 loans, which would have been primarily homeowners, and the different types of loans in terms of gender, we have 21 male, and the remainder, which would have been 65 being females in total. So I will just pass on to Ms. Gordon since we have a limited time, and she will explain the process of how it was and how she felt about the total overall process when she went through the SURF Fund, Adaptation Fund.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. The process it takes too long. And I think $250,000 in this time of process. The SURF Fund was a good thing, but $250,000. We go through a pandemic of COVID, and it's not good. But my home, I didn't have to put on to go through. I don't know if Mario have picture to show you from then to now. But the process is, it takes too long. I sent in my application in June of 2015, and it takes me about 6 months to get it approved. When you get it approved, then then I have somebody that went through the process. When they started, the technician come and say it's okay. But when time for him to get the first set of loan, the second set, they say he breached the contract. Now I have pictures that somebody put in the application, the technician come and said that, yes, you need a new home. Then when time comes to get the new home, then they decline, say that is not good. The prices is too high, not too low. The cost of living in Antigua is very high. Material go up about three times. I complete my home, right now I have to tile and paint. That is not in the fund. The fund already finished, and I have to see if I can get different funds now so I can tile and paint. I don't know if Mario have picture that he can show you from then to now. But the process is good, and we have people apply since December last year. And we're going into a new month in few days. And what's going on? Okay, I moved my home from board to wall. And that is very beneficial, but the price in Antigua is, price go up every day.
So we would have one of our, that was just one of our applicants. We have many other applicants who would have went the same process in terms of increasing prices in a way of gaining total adaptation against hurricane. Most of our applicants, their homes are not in the best condition in terms of to withstand not even a category 1 hurricane, which is so unfortunate. However, the delay in processing loans are based primarily on how much funds is available to process, so which causes a major delay. So at this time, we are asking applicants to just hold a while and to bear with us as we continue to find ways in which we can ensure their safety going back into our next hurricane season. So that'll be it for the presentation. Thank you for listening. We'll be circulating the pictures of the befores and after for Miss Garden's home, as well as others who would have completed the projects on this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romario. And this is very good to hear directly from the beneficiaries. And this is a feedback that we will take into account when designing the projects which will follow the same process. But I want to ask you maybe an immediate question before we can move to the next presentation. So Ms. Cheryl mentioned that the delay to process the loan has been quite lengthy, and they they have experienced some issues about that. So I wonder if you can maybe elaborate briefly about that, Mr. Romero. Is there any specific reason for this local funding to be delivered, and if there is any support that the project has provided to the grantee in terms of designing and submitting the proposal for funding? If you can do that maybe in 1-2 minutes, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I will join the team in 2021, February. So before, which was knowledge to me, is that there was a change in the team, the overall team for 2015, and there was another change which was done last year, which caused the major delay as well as the effect of COVID-19 on the overall economy in Antigua and Barbuda. So that's just basically the issues. What we did in to solve some of this delay is that we went to the board and we request of the board that rapid approvals would be done because it was scheduled in the agreement that they would meet every quarter. We found that every quarter was a kind of lengthy period and requested that, hey, we should have like in between decisions so applicants can get access to the fund. So that was done in terms of to mitigate the slowness of the loan.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very helpful. In any case, we can maybe come back to your presentation with more questions from the audience at the end of the session. I think we're really running out of time now. I want to go to the next session. So as you know, we have implemented as part of our medium-term strategy, the innovation window, which is under the innovation pillar. And the Adaptation Fund board has funded a small grant aggregator program to be implemented by UNDP and UNEP for about $10 million. And this aggregator has been under implementation for over a year now. And we have with us today some grantees to share their experience on accessing this funding. So we have with us Yemuel, who is the representative from indigenous tribe in Philippines, called Bukta. So I want to ask you, Yemuel, if you can tell us maybe some of your experience on accessing the climate change adaptation innovation funding through AFCIA, the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator. And what is the role of indigenous communities in accessing this funding? If you can have some brief feedback on that, and perhaps also you can tell us maybe about the objectives of the project you have submitted and what are the expected benefits. So if you can do that again in, let's say maybe in 5 minutes. Sorry to cut short a bit your presentation, but you can go up to 8 minutes if you don't mind. Thanks. Go ahead. I don't know if you have Datu Yemuel with us. Alisa, do you have him?
Yes.
Yes, he is here.
Yes,
My internet connection is very, very weak, so I'll put off the camera first.
yes, please.
Every now and then it's gone. Okay. So our proposed initiative is the establishment of giant bamboo plantation and cacao plantation for climate change adaptation and poverty alleviation. So regarding our experience in accessing CCA innovation funding through AFCIA, our group, the BUCDA, is a new applicant to the CCA innovation funding. Through this Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator. It was during the peak of the pandemic due to the COVID-19 when we noticed the call for project proposals by the UNDP AFCIA sometime in June 2020. The UNDP AFCIA was new to our vocabulary during that time, but since the agency was talking about climate change impacts, which is a common concern all over the world, especially to us vulnerable indigenous peoples or indigenous cultural communities in the Philippines. We took courage to apply for a grant under the UNDP AFC CIA, and with the patience and expert guidance of the UNDP coordinator, Mr. Charles, and the consultants, Dr. Clint and Dr. Elizabeth. So we were able to finish and submit on time the required documents. And eventually, to our great surprise and with a grateful heart, we were among those that were selected as grantees. And regarding the role of the indigenous communities in accessing the CCA Innovation Finance, we belong to the Bukidnon Umayamnan tribe, one of the 105 currently listed indigenous peoples, or IPs, indigenous cultural communities in the Philippines. So particularly for this project, funded under the CCA Innovation Finance, the whole project will be implemented within our ancestral domain. The number of our KADTI, or ancestral domain title, it's R10 space CAB space 0709 space 124. And only the members of our ancestral domain can participate in the project implementation and, of course, directly share in the benefits. The objectives of this project, and of course some expected benefits, are as follows. So for the primary objectives of the proposed project, number one, help in the participatory mitigation of climate change impacts and accelerate watershed rehabilitation and soil erosion control along the riparian zones of Pulangi River, which is the second largest river system in the Philippines. And this is partly within our ancestral domain. The second objective is to generate sustainable income for our members, the indigenous peoples. The project will establish a 10-hectare giant bamboo plantation that is Dendrocalamus asper, and a 10-hectare cacao plantation. The giant bamboo plantation will be harvested starting the sixth year up to 35th year for engineered bamboo products. It is also noted to have an excellent carbon sequestration property, about 40 tons per hectare per year. And the cacao will start to generate income for our farmers starting the third year. And if managed appropriately, it will be a source of our sustainable income. And the income from both the giant bamboo and cacao will be managed by the Council of Elders of our ancestral domain, which is BUKDA in short, for the benefit of all members of our ancestral domain. So this project will start with a lot of capacity building for our members who will be involved in the plantation establishments, and this includes women. And at least 60 families, 60 members of our ancestral domain will benefit from this 10-hectare giant bamboo plantation and also the 10-hectare cacao plantation. So that's all for our proposed initiative in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you again. This is very interesting to hear directly from you working on the ground. And by the way, thanks for staying so late. I know that it's almost midnight in where you are, so thanks again for your time and your presentation. I will now, and again, please hold your questions until the end, or perhaps you can put them in the Q&A, and then we can try to answer those, but we can have a Q&A session at the end. The next speaker, who is also going to speak about the AFCIA and how they are benefited from this program, is Mr. Andre Luis Rodriguez Goncalves, who is a technical coordinator at the Centro Ecologico in Brazil. So they have him benefiting from a proposed project called Combining Income and Forest Protection in Southern Brazil. So Mr. Andre Luis, if you can also speak about the experience you had with the AFCIA and how the approach of your project has supported innovations on the ground, and if you can talk us about the expected benefits. So I will give the floor to you, Mr. Andres.
Well, thank you very much, Mahamat. And I would like to say a very thank you for the invitation. I want to greet the organizers and all participants. And it's really an honor for me to be in real privilege to be here. And I want to say a special thank you to Charles from UNDP Bangkok. And I'm going to go directly to the questions, to stick to the questions. So the first one is related to the experience of accessing the grant. And I have to say that compared to other cooperation agencies, the process of accessing the grants is very straightforward, very simple. And the amount, it's substantial. And I think that's something really good about the program. And I have some past experience with other UN agencies, such as the Global Environmental Facility, the Global Climate, the Green Climate Fund, and it's in general, it's very complex, very bureaucratic. And I think that, of course, the scale and the amount is very different, but I think the experience of accessing the grant from the AFCIA, it's very, very good. And I would say to please keep simplicity. I think this is an advantage. And another positive aspect is the orientation to invest in vulnerable population in grassroots organizations such as indigenous people, women, people living in areas under severe climate risk. And I think this is also another very good characteristic of the program. And I think that together with climate change, food insecurity is a critical topic. And I think that this intention to invest in adaptation strategies oriented to smallholders producing food is very relevant. So that's another positive aspect of the program, at least what concern to our project. And I would say some issues to improve the program, if I may recommend, or if I may give my opinion. Forms and application just in English. And I think it reduces the chances of many organizations around the world, particularly here in Brazil. It's not very common for organizations, especially grassroots organizations, to have people skilled enough to write a proposal in English. And I know that here in Brazil, not many organizations know the program. And I think that's something that the organization could think about. And another thing that I want to mention is the second round of the screening process. And the form, after the first screening process, the second one where we have a more elaborate form. And I think that it could indicate how extensive we should answer all the questions, because someone prolix like myself will get some kind of lost. And if I may say, some agility to clear all approved projects, to sign up the contract and release the funds. Because when we approve a project, there's a lot of expectation, especially in people in the ground. And also the agricultural calendar, it's not the same calendar as a fiscal year or as the calendar of many of the agencies. So I think that if you, a little bit of more agility to release the funds to sign up the contract. I know there's a lot of process to go through, a lot of process to go. But I think if you could be more agile to release the fund, it would be better. And related to the approach of our project is oriented to improve the acai production chain in the Atlantic forest region. Acai is typically, it's a trendy fruit, traditionally from the Amazon region, and the novelty of this project is to having the Atlantic forest to producing acai from a similar plant, for the same, it's another species, but with the same genus. So that's the novelty, the approach of our project. And also it's to invest in a nature-based solution of redesign agriculture system to mimic or replicate the original ecosystem. Nature as a technological matrix. That's our approach to the project. And I don't believe that we'll be able to overcome the social environmental crisis if we don't move towards the ecological patterns in terms of structure and functionality, particularly in tropical regions. So our project is about mimicking the original ecosystem to produce food and to produce more income for farmers. And another approach is to invest in what we call virtual circle of production and consumption, what today is called the circular economy. We're not just working in the production aspect. We are working with the production, but also we are concerned about the marketing strategies. So we are concerned about creating resilience, economic resilience, as we going to have more sources of income, but also ecological resilience when we are recovering the original vegetation of the Atlantic forest. What else? Acai berry from the Atlantic forest is a non-timber forest product. It's an innovation itself. Traditionally, as I said, traditionally acai comes from the Amazon region, but we are using another species with the same genus. The palm is cut to remove the herb, which is a delicacy. But so now we are creating value to the berries and not to the palm heart as an innovation. And in my opinion, we are creating value to keep the trees in the grounds. Finally, another innovation is the concept of the participatory guarantee systems to build the credibility or the accreditation of ecological products. And family farming, cultivating values of trust and reciprocity, and creates an assurance system for the products. We work in a network, in a web type, and comprising thousands of families in the 3 southernmost Brazilian states. And I understand such methodology as an important for the rural development world. And we are really looking for the grant, and thank you. I'm really glad to be participating in this event. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Andre Luis. As I said, we'll have a Q&A session right after this. And I wanted to check if our colleague from UNDP, Charles, who is managing the AFCIA program, is online, and if he wants to say a few words, since we were talking about innovation and the beneficiaries have shared their feedback. So Shara, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we go to the Q&A.
No, I just really want to thank Andrew and Jamal to present here today with their project. I fully echo their concern and feedback. It's what we need to take into account in our international development community. Timing of agriculture calendar doesn't match with grant provincial schemes and grant disbursement schedule. Grant application in different language, in maybe French and Spanish, is probably will be extremely helpful for different regions of the world, and also speed up our organization sort of capacity to process such grants and make the grant application both adhere to corporate standard and international standard, but also easy for the local organization to interpret and understand. That's something we really need to work on. I mean, Andrew's point are all well taken. We're extremely thankful for that. And I think as UNDP and the international community, those are the actually quite key questions that we need to work together, because some of the points are not easily addressed at an entity level. We need to also adhere to international standard and donor relationships, donor templates, internal UNDP templates. So I think it's something that we should think about how to flexibly provide, quicker and more direct support to local organizations that really doing the fantastic work. You hear them. It's great and fantastic work that we generally don't hear from a much larger landscape when you're looking at things at national level and provincial level. But these organizations on the ground is really doing great work and trying innovative method to building resilience to the community. So I think extremely thank you for Adaptation Fund and European Commission to support us on this particular program. We are also very new in the process. As I told all my partners, please be patient with us. We are figuring out how to do this as well and how to do this more. So I want to thank all the local partners and thank all the participants today to listen to us. And hopefully we will be able to do more of this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I echo what you said. I mean, we are aware of some of the difficulties and challenges on addressing adaptation through the local-led actions. One of them, as we have pointed out in the studies, that local-led action tend to be costly due to the administrative processing cost and some of the challenges on the ground. So those are things that we will include in our design for the next program. And of course, there is always this question of language. I mean, climate and finance access cannot be improved if we don't deal with this barrier of local context like language and so on. So those are very well taken, and without further ado, maybe we can take a few questions. I know that there are a couple of questions that have been asked on the chat and my colleagues have been answering, but I got one which is addressed maybe to Rashana from DOE Antigua and Barbuda. And the question from Carla Garager, she's asking, does the SIRF fund has all the various skills in-house? And does it have partnership with technicians or surveyors and so on? And if there is any unexpected skills that have been found and need to address in-house in the fund during the implementation. So Rashana, I don't know if you want to address that or you can come back to you.
So in terms of, I will leave the gender aspect of things to Rashana. My name is Umar Michael again from the SURF Fund. I don't know if I mentioned the acronym SURF, what it means. So it means Sustainable Island Resource Framework Fund. And it has been charged to program funds for the Adaptation Fund. In terms of the specific partnerships that the SURF Fund have, we have our partnership with some technical experts who are from our country's DCA planning team, who ensures that the building code is followed to the T. Since primarily in-house, we don't have our technical experts, we have more administrative staff who are responsible for loan processing in terms of tracking loans, in terms of ensuring that applicants are approved. Then we also have our next internal team, which we call the customer service team, which are primarily made up of junior consultants who handle the major queries and the inquiries from applicants. We also have a partnership in terms of the financial aspect with the Ministry of Finance here in Antigua and Barbuda, where we have assistance in terms of getting clarification on particular refinancing mechanism in terms of different things that we can do going forward and in aid with lessons learned from prior mistakes. I'll now pass on to Rashawn, who will touch the gender aspects of our internal team.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So just briefly, in terms of unexpected skills that we found we needed, in line with the project document, we had to ensure for the loans that the most vulnerable community members were identified. For the AF project, it's in a community where you have a lot of persons earning below a certain income, and that might live, let's say, 1.5 meters away from the waterway, which makes flooding a big issue. But at the time, the DOE did not have a strong ESS and gender team for identifying those persons or ensuring that during the loan application process, it doesn't follow the same standard, let's say, of a bank or any of the other formal financial institutions. So during the project period, the department would have hired 2 ESS and gender officers indoors for this particular purpose. And a risk and vulnerability assessment template was developed in order to identify the most vulnerable persons and ensuring that you have options for those persons when it comes to paying back the loan. So beyond the fact the loan is it's 2% concessional loans. Some of the things that were implemented were a longer period of time in order to pay back the loan so that you're paying less money per month, which was ideal for some households. So this was an unexpected skill that we found we needed while implementing the project. I will just add one thing for Cheryl, just for her to comment on that. So Cheryl, compared to the accessing from the banks, as someone from the Upper Fort Road community, what was your experience?
Well, I went to approach Royal Bank, and I have to get I'm working for the government for 34 years, and I'm not making $2,100. I approached the Royal Bank along with my son. Royal Bank want me to pay $2,900 monthly, and I'm not paying, and I'm not getting that salary. So I see the project on TV, and I apply for the STIR fund, and they give me a loan of $250,000. I have to pay back $1,232 for 20 years, and that is not bad.
All right, thank you so much, Cheryl. I hope that addresses the question from Clara.
Yeah, thank you, Rashan. I think if there is a need, maybe she can write directly to you. I have my colleague Alisa who wants to pose a question to our I don't know if he's connected. Yeah, to Remuel. So Alisa, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mohammed. I have a question for Jamil. I want to thank you for sharing about your project, and it's really nice to hear about how Indigenous communities are accessing climate finance. So that's really good to hear. I had a question related to the design of the project, and if you can share how was and if Indigenous knowledge from your community was leveraged in the design of the proposal, and some of the processes, if you can explain in terms of, you mentioned that all approvals go through the Council of Elders. So to explain a bit more about that process, that would be really good to hear, because it's nice to hear the locally driven nature and also keeping in mind the Indigenous values that were considered in the design.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for the question. You notice the word Council of Elders. We are actually 14 leaders sitting there representing every part of the ancestral domain. So the way how we manage ancestral domain, each of the tribal leaders with their clan, representing a sub-clan actually, and then they sit in the decision-making table. That's the Council of Elders, called Bukda. In fact, the name itself is also indigenous. Bukidnon Umayamnon tribe, kapuunan to mga dato. Kapuunan means origin of the leaders, Datu, tribal leaders. So we decide that sometimes it takes a long time to get the decision, but it's always consensus. And in here, before we actually entered into before we wrote our proposal, we already had a lot of discussions in the council itself. So the women leaders, we also have 3 women tribal leaders sitting in the council. So we decide, and so we divide the work. All those leaders who have areas along the riverbank, sa Pulangi River, the second largest river system in the Philippines, will qualify for the planting of the bamboo. And of course, we don't force everyone, every member, but only those who are those who want to participate. Meaning, there's no issue. If they're sold out to planting bamboo, then we go for bamboo. So even if they are members, we still give them the choice if they want to participate or not. The area, because our whole ancestral domain point in time. And then for those who don't plant bamboo, they will go for the also happy. Some ladies, some of our lady members actually go for cacao. So that's how we make decisions. It's not very difficult decision making in our council because it's of course it's participation, but we have been used to this kind of that's about 28 years already, and we seldom get funding from the government. That's the shortest explanation of it.
Thank you. I think this is really interesting. And again, I mean, it shows how local knowledge is important to address adaptation challenges on the ground. We're coming almost to the end of this session, but before trying to capture some of the discussion we had, I wanted to introduce our colleague from WRI, World Resource Institute, Tamara Koger, who is going to speak about the importance of devolving climate finance to local level in terms of decision-making and local actions. We've been proud to work with WRI last year to come up with the principle for local-led actions, and we really believe that those principles are key to address adaptation actions with local actors. So Tamara, please, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much, Mohammed. And yeah, it's great to be here. It's been really interesting to get to listen and hear about all these experiences. So thank you so much to all the speakers for sharing these. I think it's so important that we have these times to exchange and learn from each other. So as Mohammed said, my name is Tamara Koger. I work at World Resources Institute, which has been working closely with ICAD, with IIED, and a number of other organizations over the past few years, especially to understand, what is needed to support locally led adaptation and work with partners to help advance this agenda, which all of you are a really important part of. So yeah, it's great to be here just to kind of recap and talk a bit about the importance of LLA. I mean, I think the speakers who came before me did an excellent job of doing that just by explaining, the work that they've been doing in practice and what that has resulted in and how important it has been in those specific examples to have local communities involved. So a lot of this might be a recap of what we've already heard. But I think it's been really great to hear these specific examples that really illustrate this, that illustrate that local actors are the ones who understand the nuance of the local context that they're involved in. And, when we're talking about adapting to climate risk, these challenges are complex and we're operating in really dynamic environments. So to be able to have these experts on the ground who've been dealing with and who understand the political economy, and they understand, what solutions are most likely to be sustainable in the long run, that's really critical. And I think it's really important that we value that expertise and the importance of that local input, and be able to bring that expertise into the decision-making processes, which a lot of these projects have illustrated. I think another important piece of this that we've shown is just the idea of ownership and making sure that these local partners who are the ones directly experiencing climate risks and that should have ownership over these programs, that is conducive to more sustainable and long-term resilience building and uptake. Another factor of this is just that households and communities are already the biggest spenders on adaptation globally. And so, they know how to address problems at lower costs and greater speeds. And so warrant that role in decision-making over these processes. One other thing that I wanted to flag is just the global relevance of locally led adaptation. We heard from examples all over the world, and this is relevant everywhere. It's relevant in across the global south and also across the global north. We're seeing this globally, and it's relevant across sectors. This is a cross-cutting topic, and I think that's another thing that's been really rich about this discussion, is being able to hear from examples across different sectors, from agriculture to ecosystem resilience building and many more. And thinking about the importance of devolving decision making and supporting locally led adaptation. One thing that we've learned from our research is that it's important to keep talking about this and keep exploring these solutions, because to date, what the research shows is that it's not being done at the scale required. WRI has done research showing, we did a meta-analysis last year of 374 community-centered projects. So they were aiming to be community-centered, but only 22 of them really involved decision-making and leadership roles. And what we learned from that 6% that really were locally led, that those projects were able to better address local priorities, which is not surprising. There's another study that came out last year that was published in World Development that found that, when processes were top down, when there was poor representation of groups that have been marginalized in decision-making processes, that those projects were more likely to have unintended consequences. And so we know that there is a risk in not involving local partners and not devolving decision-making. And that when we do ensure that adaptation is genuinely locally led, that we're more likely to see more effective adaptation programs in the long run. And so I think it's really valuable to be able to understand what that actually looks like. I think it's also exciting to see this uptake and this increasing attention for locally led adaptation. The investments at Adaptation Fund and these projects that all of you are leading are examples of that. We've seen a lot of increased attention and additional commitments at COP26 this past November, growing endorsements to the principles for locally led adaptation that Mohammed mentioned, additional commitments from organizations like USA, recognition from influential organizations like the G7. So this is getting more attention, which is exciting, that it's that more organizations globally and as well as national governments are starting to recognize the importance of locally led adaptation. And I think what we're doing now, WI and partners and clearly, Adaptation Fund through this event is trying to learn about, okay, what can we do to support these commitments? What is some of the evidence around best practice that we can learn from so that we can really bring this to the scale that is required to meet the urgency of the climate crisis. So, we have these principles that we can share in the chat, which serve as the foundation, but I think that the practices and examples that we cover today really help explore, what it looks like to break those down and to implement them in these different contexts, what it actually can look like. So yeah, I just encourage more learning, both from these good practices as well as some of the areas that could be improved, both in terms of finance mechanisms as well as breaking down what these decision-making processes look like. It's really helpful and happy to continue being part of this learning journey.
Thanks, Tamara. This is very, very nice to hear from you. And I mean, again, we are really committed to advance these locally led actions, adaptation actions, with which we believe is key to address adaptation challenges. I will not try to summarize the discussion. In any case, it won't be a justice to what has been said. I think so many interesting things have been said. But just some key takeaways. We learn from speakers and from our partners on the ground that it's important to downscale climate science to local level. And thanks for Sambi to address, to share some of the key success they have on implementing the EDA projects, which we hope to continue, hopefully with additional support. At the Adaptation Fund, we believe that adaptation is first and foremost a local issue. So it has to be addressed with local knowledge and local actors. So that's why we believe that through our enhanced direct access modality and the direct access modality that we have been implementing, those can be implemented to deliver concrete results. We also learned from and heard from so many of you that to have local-led actions successful, we need to have a simplified process, and this is something that we strive to complete. In any case, we cannot achieve climate finance access if we don't simplify the process, in particular for the local actors. Thanks for my colleague Christina, who has shared the main findings of the study we have produced. And again, this study is available on our website, and we are using the findings to implement, to improve our work on the ground. So hopefully this can be also a benefit for you, for the ones connected today. And also we heard some of the issue about language, about taking into account local context, and we believe that this is an important key takeaways that we will take on board. And again, we are committed to advance the locally led actions. We are transitioning to our new medium-term strategy, which is going to be discussed at the next board meeting. And we hope that this issue of the local-led adaptation actions is something that the Adaptation Fund can continue. And again, thanks again for everyone for your time and your interest. We will be